I rubbed my eyes and yawned. For some reason, I lifted the thermos to my mouth like I didn't know it was already empty. Even after downing the whole thing, I felt exhausted, and like I hadn't slept in days. I placed the thermos back into the cup holder, fixing my gaze firmly on the straight, dark road ahead. Suddenly, the screen on my car lit up, signaling an incoming call. I saw that it was Mikey, so I answered.
"You staying awake back there, mate?"
He asked in a chipper voice. I rolled my eyes, but I laughed. He was always in an infectiously good mood.
"Yeah, man, just barely. How did you convince me to help you move house in the middle of the night again?"
I heard him chuckle on the other end of the line. He knew that I could never say no to him. We had been friends for too long. It had always been me and Mikey ever since we were kids.
"Not long now, should only be a few more hours. Hey, if you want company, I just stopped for petrol, and there's a hitchhiker out the front of the station. He seemed like a nice guy and said he was heading our way." "Mikey, there are always hitchhikers at that spot, and they usually look pretty weird. I know it seems rude, but I always assume those guys must be crazy. I mean, who would get into the car with a stranger in the middle of the night?" "Come on, man,"
he pleaded.
"This guy seemed pretty cool. He even said he would help us move my stuff in if we took him all the way there. I would have taken him myself, but my car is totally packed. And besides, man..."
He paused, and I could tell that he had a stupid grin on his face.
"I already told him that you would give him a lift, so you would seem like a total dick if you didn't."
I sighed. Mikey could be such a jerk, but he had a point. Both our cars were almost completely full, and we already had a van packed with furniture waiting for us when we had arrived. If this hitchhiker really wanted help, it could be worth it. After another 10 minutes of driving, I pulled up to the service station, and sure enough, there was a group of guys huddled together out front smoking. I was annoyed. Mikey had only mentioned one person. There was no way I could fit anyone else in the car. I rolled my passenger side window down and yelled, "Hey, is one of you guys looking for a ride up to West Point?" A member of the group looked in my direction excitedly. He threw his cigarette down, picked up a big backpack which was on the ground next to him, and waved goodbye to the others. As he walked up to the car, I saw that he was a young kid, probably no older than 21. "Hey dude, thanks for the ride. I'm heading up to West Point, yeah." "Great," I said as he hops into the passenger seat. "Sorry about the mess in the back seat. You'll have to put your backpack between your legs." "No worries, I'm just happy someone finally came past. It's been a pretty quiet night," he replied eagerly. We fell into a bit of an awkward silence after that. I'm a pretty shy guy, usually keeping to myself as much as possible. Honestly, I'm no good at conversation, especially small talk. Luckily, he seemed happy to just stare out the side window. We were entering a forest now, and with a full moon lighting up our surroundings, it was turning out to be a tranquil drive. As we continued the trip, I noticed that further up ahead there was a road sign which looked completely different to the usual ones that you see dotted in the landscape. It was huge, probably at least 20 feet high and completely black. Illuminated by a bright light on the front were massive white block letters which read, "Public Service Announcement. Beware of dangerous hitchhikers in the area." I shifted on my seat and glanced over at the hitchhiker that I had just picked up, feeling a little bit worried. "That was a weird sign. I've never seen one like that around here before," I said, trying not to sound nervous. He looked back over to me and said, "Oh, sorry, I didn't see anything. I've just been staring at this side of the car." "What did it say?" "Never mind," I replied, gripping the steering wheel a little tighter. He shrugged, turning his head back out the window. As I stared out at the road, I swore that I caught him looking over at me out of the corner of his eye. After that, the atmosphere in the car was tense. How could he not have seen the sign? It was the only thing that we had passed aside from trees in almost an hour. If he had seen it, why was he playing dumb? I know that sometimes I'm prone to being a little paranoid, but the whole situation felt off. I could tell that I was starting to get overwhelmed, so I tried to calm myself down. I reasoned that maybe he had seen the sign, but didn't want to acknowledge it because it could lead to an uncomfortable conversation. Obviously, I had no reason to suspect that he was the one it was referring to. He seemed like a nice kid. I decided to not bring it up and just keep on my guard. I jumped back in my seat a little when the car screen lit up. I saw that it was Mikey calling again. I remembered that he was only a little further up the road and calmed down a little. If anything went wrong, he wasn't far away. I plugged my headphones in and answered.
Mikey, how's it going, man?
At the sudden sound of my voice, the kid spun around and looked at me in confusion. I gave him a weak grin and pointed to my headphones. He nodded and he turned back to look out the window.
Hey dude.
Mikey stammered, sounding worried.
Have you been listening to the radio at all? No, we've just been enjoying the peaceful drive.
I responded, conscious that the kid was sitting next to me.
I ended up picking up that hitchhiker that you mentioned. It's been good to have some company.
When I said that, the kid glanced over at me strangely and started to drum his fingers on the dashboard in front of him.
Oh crap, you picked him up?
I could hear an uncharacteristic hint of fear in his voice.
Look man, I think that was a mistake. I just heard on the radio that the police think there's a serial killer in the area who's posing as a hitchhiker. They gave a description of him, and it sounds exactly like the kid that I spoke to. If he's in there with you, don't react to this at all. You can't let him know.
It took every ounce of willpower I had to keep myself from visibly panicking after I heard this. Of course, internally, all alarms were pounding at full volume.
Oh, cool. Yeah, sounds good, dude. I'll meet you up at the next petrol station. I could use another coffee.
I responded, trying to keep the fear which was building inside of me from spilling out into my voice.
Okay, stay in the line but pretend that you've hung up.
Mikey said, clearly just as freaked out as I was.
I've stopped just a bit further up on the road. Pull over when you see me and we'll deal with him together. Alright, bye dude, I'll see you soon.
I said with a forced laugh, trying to make it seem like he had told a joke. The kid turned to me, and it seemed like he had a strange look in his eyes, like he could sense that I knew something was off. So, who was that you were talking to? He asked. Oh, that was just Mikey, I responded, masking my fear with a pathetic attempt at a smile. He's the guy you spoke to at the petrol station earlier. At this, the kid reached into his bag, seemingly almost out of instinct. Hey, you know what? Would you be able to let me out of the car here? I might just walk the rest of the way. I was shocked by how brazen he was being. I could see that he was fidgeting with the zip of his bag. I knew he had a weapon in there. I pictured him driving a knife deep into my neck as soon as I stopped the car. Doing a poor job of pretending to be casual about the situation, I muttered, You can't walk from here. It's probably 5 or 6 hours on foot to the nearest town. And besides, if you get out, who's going to help Mikey and I move all this stuff into his new house? I pointed my thumb towards the back seat. The kid turned to look behind him and then looked back at me, exclaiming, Look, dude, you're really starting to scare me, okay? I never spoke to any driver at the petrol station back there. And I'm not sure why or how I would help someone move all these old newspapers and magazines into a house. At this point, I was completely dumbfounded. He was acting like I was the insane one. I knew that I must be in the car with a complete psychopath. I decided to try and bide time until we made it up to Mikey. I was hoping that he wouldn't try anything, given that we were driving at such a high speed. Trying to placate him, I said, Okay mate, no worries. Like I said, we're coming up on another station, so I'll let you out there. He seemed to relax a little at this. He probably thought that he had tricked me by acting so frightened. I admit, he had done a good job. If I hadn't known better, I would have thought that he really was just a terrified kid. I saw that we were approaching another roadside up ahead. It was the exact same as the last one, only this one read, Kill him before he kills you.
The sign's right,"
Mikey said in my ear. I had almost forgotten that I was still on the phone with him.
"You're going to have to pull over now and deal with him yourself. I'm too far away. Don't worry. Remember, you have that hammer underneath your seat."
I knew Mikey and the sign were correct. This was a dangerous situation for me, and I had to act quickly. "Okay," I said, turning to face him with as big as a grin as I could muster. "Come to think of it, maybe I will let you out here. I don't actually think there's another petrol station for a while." "Sure thing," the kid responded, still doing a good job of acting afraid. He picked up his bag and he held it tightly to his chest. I knew that I would have to keep acting naturally so I could surprise him once we had stopped. I pulled over to the side of the road and I parked the car, turning to him. "Sorry I couldn't take you all the way to West Point, but I'll just let you out here." "Sure, thanks for taking me this far," he murmured while pulling open the door. He quickly climbed out. Before he could try anything, I reached under my seat and I grabbed the hammer. After he saw this, he screamed, dropped his bag, and took off into the woods. He obviously wasn't expecting me to fight back. I got out after him and bellowed a triumphant scream of my own. Luckily, I was at least a foot taller than him and a lot quicker, so I caught up pretty easily. He must have left his weapon in the bag, which he had been stupid enough to drop, so he couldn't put up much of a fight. After I hit him from behind the first time, he folded over and crumpled into the dirt. I flipped him over and drove the hammer into his skull. I wasn't going to become just another victim. I hit him a few more times for good measure. After it was all over, I walked back to the car in a daze. When I sat back in the driver's seat, I remembered that I was still on the phone.
"Mikey, did you hear all that? I took that psycho out before he could get me. I'm just about to start driving over, but I'll see you soon."
There was no response, but I figured he was probably celebrating the good deed that I had done. I smiled, feeling like a huge weight had been lifted off my shoulders. I couldn't wait to see my best friend Mikey again. Many may find it crazy what I'm going to say, but I have seen this man. Except he was a crude, cardboard cutout of one. I don't know why he singled me out in particular, but ever since that fateful day, I feel like that he's always close to me more than I would appreciate. I was a family man with a wife and 3 kids, the eldest of the 2 being girls and one baby boy around 2 months old. They were all riding in the back of my minivan with the wife up front. We were all heading out on a trip to see my wife's parents. We left our house roughly at 4 in the afternoon. We traveled along the highway without much issue. I was driving the required speed limit, and the other vehicles around us were also heeding to the rules. I don't remember what I did at that moment. Maybe it had something to do with my wife wanting to ask me something, but whatever the case, a cement truck suddenly hit a bad place on the road and skidded in the direction of our minivan. The last that I remembered was my wife screaming at me to swerve and my daughters panicking. I tried the best that I could to move at the last minute, but the cement truck slammed against the driver's side door. I yelled at my family to shield themselves from the brunt force as best as I could. Before my vision became immersed in absolute darkness, I heard more vehicles attempting to hit their brakes to slow their speed. Around 2 hours later, I think, I regained consciousness and saw that I was in a gurney. Even with the slightest movement, it hurt immeasurably. I looked to my side to see an IV needle injected in my right wrist. Over me, there was a dark brown-haired nurse observing me. She explained that when I lost consciousness, the paramedics arrived and tended to the wounded. She mentioned that I had sustained 2 broken ribs and my leg needed a few stitches, but otherwise I was okay. But when I asked her about my wife and kids, she was hesitant in her answer. But I didn't even have to wait for a response because I saw from the corner of my eye, I beheld 4 body bags being lifted into the back of an ambulance truck. My eyes widened in disbelief. I was stammering. No, no. I didn't want to believe it. It must have been a bad dream. It had to be. I was just sleeping, and any minute I would wake up. My sights were becoming fuzzy from the hot tears seeping from my eyes. A few more ambulance trucks arrived and collected roughly around 10 more body bags, the last being the driver of the cement truck. I spent roughly a week in the hospital recovering from the accident. It was unbearable. News spread about the horrific car accidents getting heavy coverage on news stations. Of course, the photos were leaked out on accident, but opted to censor out the more graphic photographs. I was browsing the television channels when the first photograph appeared. It was of the truck driver. Somehow, despite being horribly mangled, he was able to crawl about an inch away from his driver's door. The metal pieces of his truck were deeply implanted in his leg, with a trail of blood accompanying him. Gruesome, but something seemed off. I didn't recognize it at first, but it became more clear to me. There's a man standing there in front of the truck driver. It was something that was not of this world. He was dressed in black with a blood-red tie. He stood at a starkly tall 9 foot 2 inches. But most bizarre about his appearance was his face. By God, his face. Dark black hair was in the place where his chin should be. He had a manic glare in his eyes that looked directly at the photographer. His mouth was twisted into a wide, ludicrous smile delighted at the events around him. But his orifices were all wrong. His mouth was on top and his eyes at the bottom of his feet, close to his black hair. His physique was as an emaciated skeleton with nary a bit of fatness on him. He towered over the man when the truck driver did an odd thing. He extended his hand in the direction of the mysterious man. He expired no less than a few seconds when the photo was taken. More photos appeared with the same upside-down faced man in them and doing the same gimmick, standing closer by the dying, and the dying seemed to acknowledge his presence and are asking him for assistance. But for whatever nefarious reason, he refused to grant it to them, his wide grin growing progressively larger and more deranged. I cut my hands in disbelief at what I was seeing. One more picture was up. I grimaced, but I knew I had to see it. I opened my eyes and saw that same horrible man practically levitating above my wife. Her legs were broken and beyond repair, but she somehow managed to crawl to the passenger side. My second-born daughter was impaled by the shards of glass and bleeding out badly. Mercifully, my other daughter and son died upon impact, but that was really as comparable to getting a bee sting than getting attacked by a shark. My daughter was quickly losing consciousness. Before going into shock, one of the nurses mentioned her saying something of the tall man jeering them. My hands formed into tight fists. Whatever this man was, he was not of this realm. I knew deep down in my heart that he was some sort of parasite, whether from space or a parallel dimension, it did not matter. Whoever or whatever this creature was, he took sick satisfaction in completely desecrating my life. I believed to feed on the negative emotions like some energy vampire. I spent the rest of my life sleeping with one eye open because I knew through hell and back, in snow and sleet, he was always watching me, contemplating his next move.